What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and today we're going to be having a look at the upcoming super boss this time around. I did upload a video also talking about the regular KIZUNA, so if you are more concerned about that, go check that video. I talk about each of the bosses in greater detail and give you guys some suggestions along the way. But this time we're having a look at super boss, and I've only got one team for each variation this time around. I'm just showing you guys the ideology that I have heading into this super boss, and we'll see how things go. Of course, the teams that I show in this video, I'll likely show them off when the super boss does go live, but these teams are going to change drastically as we progress through to when the event starts. So I'm very excited to jump into it. Of course, we actually broke down what this character did in the previous video, but remember, with Yamato, you will originally get this character as a 5-star character. You'll be able to pick up the skulls through the KIZUNA exchange to eventually super evolve the character. This Yamato honestly doesn't seem that great, but look, you know, this character is likely going to be boosted in upcoming events, so getting her maxed out is very useful, because I'm sure there's going to be some fight that comes out in the near future where you want to have this character ready to go. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about these super bosses. Starting things off, the first super boss is against the Dex boss, where you need to have cooldown for strength and Dex characters. Battle 2, there's going to be 5 turns of defense up and 5 turns of damage reduction. This is why we have this X-Drake on the team. I originally wanted to run Legend X-Drake because he does have Chain Boundary, which is far more useful, but this character does remove defense up, he does remove damage reduction, and does provide like some other buffs, but you know, this unit is actually boosted in this event as well, so it's like this character was kind of boosted with this in mind, that this character is actually good in this event. Another thing that this team aims to do is we'll probably use Luffy Crew Special on this stage to get really good abilities out of this character, because it does provide like a bunch of beneficial effects, and then with the support of the Wanda attached to Straw Hat Crew, it will lock our slots, which means that we can carry the full board of Dex slots into the next stage. However, they're not going to be Dex slots, because remember, when we have Kaido as our captain, his captain ability does have a really neat ability to change Dex slots into Wano. So when we reach stage 2, we will have a full board of Wano slots, and also because the enemy inflicts 10% health cut to us, the enemy will be inflicted with increased damage taken. So stage 2 is not going to be a problem in terms of damage potential. And when we reach the stage 3, there's a couple of things we need to take note of. There is immunity, but you can ignite the enemy, and this is where Big Mom is going to come in clutch as the friend captain here. The enemy super types, 10% health cut on our side of the crew, which will inflict the enemy with increased damage taken once again. There is a chain attack down, so your chain has to exceed 2.75 in order to actually start doing damage. Unfortunately, there is a really hefty Intimidate where any attack boost is reduced by a 1.0 multiplier, so that is pretty disgusting, as well as there being a good barrier for 2 turns where you have to tap a good, and there is an interrupt if you activate increased damage taken on the opponent, or you activate a color affinity special. So this is why I've opted to use Big Mom as the friend captain, because you can get access to her EX special, and her EX special will provide driven and powerhouse characters with a 2.5 times color affinity boost, and that's obviously very good, as well as providing super driven and super powerhouse. And then of course we have Kaido, which has the ability to buff the increased damage taken the opponent has, and then Big Mom and Kaido together providing us with the double stacking conditional boost, so that's already amazing. Kaido will also provide an orb boosting effect. We are using the lead performers here because of their super tandem, which we will be able to activate, as well as providing an attack boost and also further buffing the orb boost that Kaido has. So that's the whole reasoning behind that. We have Perospero. Now, Perospero on the team mainly because his special does provide a chain boundary, a 3.25 chain boundary. It's actually very solid, so we're going to have all of that active. Of course, we are going to have a full board of Wano slots, but when you use the lead performer special, they do change their own Wano slot into tandem so that we can activate the super tandem ability. And then once everything is said and done, we would have a super tandem with the lead performers. We'll have the Rush Sugo special with Kaido, and we'll have the final tap of Straw Hat Crew doing a lot of damage to the opponent. I haven't actually calculated it mathematically in terms of what the damage potential of this team will be, but what I know is that this team will beat it, definitely at level 1. This is going to do well over 1 billion damage. It's going to do a lot of damage for sure, and especially if you have the Rush Sugo special of Kaido leveled up even further, or if you're able to to apply a different super tandem on your team that is a much higher multiplier than the lead performers. I was considering characters like Legend Sasaki, who is a character that is probably going to be the go-to for a lot of people, because his super tandem will give a buff to strength, 2.25. However, it does mean that you do need to run characters like King, Queen, Jack, also Black Maria, Ulti, Page 1, Who's Who, characters such as that. Unfortunately, Big Mom is not a part of Sasaki's super tandem chain, which is a bit annoying. As I said, you know, you could have run Legend X Drake from KIZUNA Clash Sugo Fests for the chain boundary that he provides. Also, Legend Kanjuro, of course, not a great character overall, but his special is useful because it can buff your attack boosts up to 3 times and your orb boost up to 3 times, which means that any intimidated attack boost, which would have a much lower multiplier, could actually get buffed via Kanjuro. So I think that's the ideal scenario in this case in point. But this is still a pretty good team. I'm going to trial it out against the Dex Super Boss. The second super boss is the strength boss, where every character will actually receive cooldown, no matter what like type or class it is. Everyone gets cooldown. But the really annoying thing about this fight is that when you reach stage 2, cerebral characters are inflicted with 99 turns of special bind, so they are really hampering down on using New Year's Legend Robin. They do not want you to use Robin under any scenario in this fight. There is an alternate way that you could still use Robin. Shout out to Karissa for coming up with this idea of applying Legend Toki and using Toki special on your Nico Robin so that she avoids the special bind. I don't know if that is an overly optimal thing to do, but it is an interesting thing that you can do if you are hell-bent on using Nico Robin. However, what I am doing here is we're going to be using Lord Kid as the captain, and because this character is partly driven, when we activate the special of Big Mom, it will actually provide us with a conditional boost. Now, the thing is as well, is that the enemy, when we reach the last stage, is able to be inflicted with increased damage taken. And of course, with Gear 5 Luffy's EX Super, we will inflict increased damage taken, which is why we have the Enmazora on the crew, because his special ability says that if we have a free spirit or a slasher captain, which Law and Kid are free spirit, then we get a 2.25 conditional against increased damage taken characters. And, you know, my Zora is only Super Tandem level 1, but if my Super Tandem Zora was a much higher level, this could actually be kind of cracked. Alternatively, if you have Law Kid at a very high level of Super Tandem, then that is going to be amazing to make sure that Gear 5 Luffy does a lot of damage. Now, one thing to note as well is that you are inflicted with Despair on stage 2. Gear 5 Luffy does deal with that, but on battle 3, this is the first introduction of a mixed type enemy in the game. So what happens is, for the first 50% of the enemy's health bar, they are considered a strength character. However, once you get that character below 50%, they transform into a quick unit. So having damage that is multi-typed is actually pretty important. Or alternatively, you have super effective damage, which is what Gear 5 aims to do. Now, there is also super block slots, which is pretty annoying to deal with, which is why we have the EX Super of Gear 5 Luffy, which can change all slots, including block and super block, into matching. There is also 2 turns of attack down, so there are a couple ways to get around it. In this team composition, we're using this Corazon support. I know not a lot of people have this unit, and that's completely okay. There are other attack down reducing supports you can be using on this crew. This is just the one that I selected. There's limited rare recruit Tashigi, which you could attach to Zoro. I'm using this Rogue that is attached to Zoro here. It was a treasure map rare recruit, and when we reach the last stage, side characters get a 500 base attack boost, so that's kind of okay. But I'm just realizing now that Sanji does a base attack boost, so yeah, you don't need that support on Zoro. You could replace it with whatever you want. We have the Otama attached to Big Mom, so that will buff the conditional boosts of Big Mom and also the Zoro. We have Sanji for all the chain shenanigans, and we do have the Jack. Now, I am a little concerned in terms of the damage output that we can do here. So what the ideal scenario is with this team is that we would super swap with Law and Kid into Kid, so he is Int, on stage 2 to get the chain multiplicative buff, and then we'd use Jack special so that we have one of every type on the crew, so the color affinity of Jack will be for the whole crew. So ideally, that would mean that, you know, Luffy does a lot of damage because he'll be super effective. We have one of every color on the crew, we have color affinity, we have chain multiplicative buff, and that's very important because when you reach the last stage as well, you're not allowed to activate color affinity on the final stage, because if you do, then you get your beneficial effects removed and your middle and bottom row are stunned. So you don't want that to happen. So the best way to get around it is by having an EX super type special that inflicts color affinity, or to have a support that does color affinity. Unfortunately, there's no other real great ways around it, unless if there's a character that I'm completely missing, maybe like a timed buff, so that, you know, if you hit a certain amount of perfects, or a clock buff, then, you know, applying color affinity on the final stage, that is also a pretty good way to get that as well. But this is a pretty interesting team. I really am interested to see how this team actually works against this content, but, you know, on paper, it does seem like it should work, but we'll see how things progress. And then we have the final super boss against the Int variation, where Free Spirit and Powerhouse receive cooldown. Now, for this fight here, we're using the hybrid captain of both 6+ and 6-star Gear 5 Luffy. And this is actually pretty important for this fight, as when we get to the last stage, it's actually kind of important that we have this combo. Battle 2, you are inflicted with hunger, and there aren't a lot of good characters that I was thinking of that could really help us in this scenario, which is why I'm using Ace and Yamato, as they do have the potential ability of removing that. Now, in terms of this team getting around stage 2, there is also a barrier where you have to hit 4 goods to break it, and that's very frustrating. But what we're doing here is we're using the Nami special, because Nami does provide us with a chain boundary. There's no other real reason why we're using it. We just needed an Int character on the crew, just so that we had, you know, one of every color, so that we had super effective damage with Gear 5, because I'm not sure what color the boss is on stage 2. Depending on the color of the boss, you may not even need one of every color. So that's something to take note of. When you reach the last stage, it actually doesn't matter that you need, like, that you have one of every color, so you can swap and do whatever you want when you reach the final stage. But having all colors when you reach stage 2 is actually pretty important for this team, just to make sure you can kill stage 2. But then when you reach stage 3, because the boss is already Int, you know, Gear 5 Luffy being the heavy hitter, it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day. But when you reach the last stage, there is going to be full immunity except for increased damage taken. So you can use the EX Super of 6+ Gear 5 to inflict that to the opponent. There is also Super Type, you get a full board of badly matching slots. There is Intimidate, where attack, orb, color affinity, and conditional boosts all get nerfed by 0.6 multiplier, which is ridiculous. There is 2 turns of attack down and bind to the middle row. So of course, with 6-star Gear 5 Luffy Friend Captain, we can avoid the bind. The 2 turns of attack down is removed via the new support of Momonosuke. Of course, there are quite a lot of ways you could remove attack down via supports. And then of course, the other thing is that there is an interrupt. If you use a damage dealing special, the opponent will inflict 150,000 damage to the crew. And the thing is with this team is, if we don't have enough HP to survive it, then we will revive with the 6-star Gear 5 Luffy. So that's the reason why we have this Luffy as the friend captain, because of the revive mechanic that he is able to apply to the crew. Of course, if we have enough HP, then that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, but it is actually useful that we do die, and the reason for that is because we get the full HP recovery, which means that we can do more damage with the rush of Gear 5 Luffy. So it is actually important that you are able to be knocked out via that effect. And then, of course, with this team, we have Robin for conditional boosts, a double stacking conditional boost. Of course, we can get the ignited conditional boost with Ace and Yamato. We have the attack, orb, and affinity boost with both Gear 5s, with the Sabre support on my Gear 5, so we can do even more damage with him. And then all of the chain shenanigans with Sanji. So this is going to do a really good amount of damage. I am very, very excited to see how much damage we can do with this team, despite the Intimidate, which is reducing the multipliers of a lot of buffs that we're trying to inflict by a pretty big margin. This is still going to do a hell of a lot of damage, so I'm very excited to jump into the content with this one. But as long as you have, you know, a way to get around the barrier, and with this team, we're just using the Nami special, which gives us chain boundary, and then we have the dog special, which gives us an attack boost for the crew, and then we're ideally hitting 4 goods to break the barrier, and then Luffy will just hit really, really hard with super effective damage against the opponent. And then, of course, you have to be very cautious of the 150k that is dealt to you on stage 3. So all in all, that is going to wrap it up from me for the Super Boss preparation. Of course, when the Super Boss officially releases, the teams that you see here may change slightly. So just be known of that, you know, that things are going to change moving forward. But these are just the first draft of teams that I was thinking of up against the upcoming Super Boss. But hopefully you enjoyed this one. And if you guys did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.